You're going to do exactly what I tell you, you insolent little girl, or you can pack your things. Manager Derek Harrison grabbed Emma's arm tightly, dragging her toward the back of the Sterling Heights restaurant, away from the security cameras. Emma Collins, 29, never imagined that her 2-year job at Boston's most prestigious restaurant would end with her being humiliated for refusing to accept a bribe from an influential customer. Congressman Bradley had left an envelope with $7,000 to forget that he saw Derek tampering with receipts. And she simply said no. "Please, Mr. Harrison, let go of my arm," Emma said with a calmness that further irritated the manager. "I will not accept dirty money. Period." Derek growled, pushing her against the wall of the narrow hallway. "Listen here, you stuck-up little girl. You think you're better than everyone else? That you can lecture me?" His face was purple with rage. "You're just a waitress I took pity on and hired. People like you should be grateful to have a job." What Derek didn't know was that Emma had recorded every word on her cell phone hidden in her apron pocket. Over the past 8 months, she had systematically documented every abusive comment, every corrupt scheme, every abuse of power she had witnessed in that place. "Let's have a private chat in the storage room," Derek whispered, squeezing her arm even tighter. "Maybe you'll understand your position here better after I explain exactly how things work." Emma took a deep breath, maintaining the composure she had learned over years of dealing with men like Derek. "You don't want to do that, Mr. Harrison." "Oh, I don't." He laughed cruelly. "And who's going to stop me? Your little husband? That failed carpenter who can't even give you a decent life?" That's when a cold voice cut through the air like a blade. "I would say you should let go of my wife immediately." Derek turned and went pale. From the dark corner near the back entrance, a tall man in an impeccable suit was walking toward them. His eyes were cold as winter, and 2 intimidatingly large men accompanied him a few steps behind. "James Blackwell," Derek muttered, recognizing the name that everyone in Boston knew, even if they had never seen his face. Emma smiled for the first time that night. In 4 years of marriage, she had never revealed at work that her husband was one of the most powerful business figures in Boston. She enjoyed her independence, building her own reputation away from the shadow of his influence. But she had called James 3 hours earlier when she realized the situation was escalating dangerously. James stopped a meter away from Derek, who was still holding Emma's arm. "You have 3 seconds to explain why you're touching my wife." Derek let go of Emma, as if she were on fire. I didn't know. It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" James tilted his head, his tone dangerously calm. "You called my wife an insolent little girl and dragged her to a place without cameras. That seems pretty intentional to me." Emma watched the scene with growing satisfaction. For months, Derek had treated her as if she were inferior, as if she were nothing more than an unimportant waitress, as if people like her should accept any humiliation in silence. Now, seeing that arrogant man tremble before her husband, she realized that her strategic patience was about to yield far greater rewards than any direct confrontation ever could. James took a step forward and Derek instinctively backed away, stumbling over his own legs. I didn't know she was your wife, Mr. Blackwell. It was just a misunderstanding between employees. Nothing serious." "Misunderstanding?" James repeated slowly, as if savoring each syllable. "You just called my wife an insolent little girl and dragged her to a secluded place against her will. That seems too specific for a misunderstanding." Emma watched Derek crumble before her eyes. For 2 years, that man had treated her like trash, making condescending comments disguised as jokes, touching her shoulder inappropriately, and cutting her pay whenever she questioned anything. He saw her as a disposable waitress with no connections, no power, no importance. "Look, Mr. Blackwell," Derek tried to regain some composure. "Your wife has been problematic lately, questioning procedures, refusing to follow simple orders. Orders like accepting bribes?" Emma interrupted, pulling her cell phone from her apron pocket. "Like this recording of you offering me $7,000 to forget about Congressman Bradley's fake receipts?" The color drained completely from Derek's face. You recorded me?" Emma smiled, her voice steady and calm. "Derek, over the past 8 months, you've been recorded 46 times, photographed 31 times, and documented in 74 detailed reports that I sent weekly to my husband." For months, while Derek humiliated her daily, Emma had methodically built a complete dossier of the restaurant's illegal activities. Every bribed customer, every tampered receipt, every condescending comment, every inappropriate touch, all carefully recorded and dated. Did you really think that a woman with a degree in business administration from Harvard University, who speaks 5 languages and has a master's degree in hospitality management, was working as a waitress because she had no other choice? Emma tilted her head, her polite tone masking her growing satisfaction. Derek opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. But you never said. I thought. You thought what? That because I'm just a waitress, I should accept any humiliation in silence? That because I work in service, I couldn't have an education or connections? Emma took a step forward. You built an image of me based purely on your prejudice, Derek. And that was your biggest mistake. James watched his wife with obvious pride. When she had suggested working undercover to investigate the activities of the restaurant he suspected was being used for money laundering, he had hesitated. But Emma had insisted. She wanted to prove she could contribute to the family business using her own expertise. During these 2 years, Emma continued, her voice sharp, you didn't just humiliate me. You humiliated Sarah in the kitchen, saying single mothers are unreliable workers. You harassed Jessica the sommelier, making inappropriate comments about her appearance. And you systematically stole from customers who trusted you. Derek tried one last desperate gambit. Wait, I can explain all this. We can come to an agreement, Mr. Blackwell. I have valuable information about other restaurants, about competitors. Information you might find. James smiled coldly. Derek, you're offering information to the man who has known everything that goes on in this city for years. My wife wasn't here to uncover secrets. She was here to document evidence. The difference was crucial, and Derek was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his situation. He hadn't been caught red-handed. He had been studied, cataloged, and documented like a laboratory specimen for months. Congressman Bradley will be delighted to know that your transactions have been recorded, Emma continued casually. As will Judge Morrison, City Councilman Walsh, and that real estate mogul you've been facilitating for over a year. Derek felt his legs buckle. Each name Emma mentioned represented not just a lost client, but a powerful person who would now become his enemy when they discovered they had been exposed because of his incompetence. Please, he whispered, the arrogant tone completely gone. I have a family. Children. Funny you should mention family, James said softly. Because that's exactly what you should have remembered before you laid your hands on mine. What Derek didn't know, and Emma was about to reveal, was that the last 8 months of documentation had not only exposed a corrupt manager. They had mapped out an entire network of corruption connecting politicians, judges, and businessmen in the city, using Sterling Heights as the hub for their illicit transactions. Each new humiliation Derek had imposed only strengthened something within Emma that he had never been able to see. A quiet determination fueled by the very injustice he tried to normalize, building not only a case against him, but against an entire system that people like Derek represented and protected. As Derek begged for mercy, Emma calmly opened the briefcase she had brought with her. A briefcase he had seen hundreds of times, always assuming it contained only schedules or customer complaints. For 2 years, Derek had watched his subordinate take that briefcase home every night, never suspecting that she was compiling his own destruction page by page. And now, standing in that hallway, watching the man who'd made her life miserable finally understand the trap he'd walked into, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Derek, do you remember when you said I should be grateful for having a job? Emma leafed through the documents methodically, her voice calm as steel. Specifically, on April 15th, when Congressman Bradley arrived with that campaign check that you deposited into your personal account instead of the restaurant's books. Derek tried one last desperate gambit, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. I'm going to call Congressman Bradley right now. He'll take care of this. He has influence in this town. Connections you can't even imagine. James and Emma exchanged an amused glance. Derek really believed that his political connections could save him from an investigation that had already involved the FBI for months. Go ahead and call, James said softly, his tone dangerous. But you should know that Congressman Bradley is at this very moment being arrested at his residence for money laundering and tax evasion. The color drained completely from Derek's face. That's impossible. Operation Sterling Sweep, Emma said casually, turning a page in the folder. 8 months of joint investigation between the FBI, the IRS, and the Boston Police Department. 14 politicians, 9 judges, 18 businessmen. All connected through the transactions you facilitated here at Sterling Heights. Derek staggered, leaning against the wall. For months, he had felt untouchable, protected by a network of corrupt officials he considered his friends. Powerful men who greeted him by name, who gave him generous bribes, who made him feel important. Judge Morrison, Derek whispered, his voice shaking. Arrested 3 hours ago, James replied, checking his watch. As were City Councilman Walsh and that real estate developer you admired so much. Emma continued leafing through the folder, each page representing months of meticulous work. Photos of suspicious checks, recordings of conversations, transfer records, even handwriting analyses proving Derek's forgeries. You know what impresses me most, Derek? Emma paused at a specific photo. In this document, you forged James's own signature. The man standing next to you right now has known your every move for months, and you had the audacity to forge his name. It was then that Derek realized the true magnitude of his situation. He hadn't just stolen from clients or accepted bribes. He had inadvertently stolen from the most dangerous businessman in Boston, documenting every crime while believing he was being clever. Please, Derek collapsed to his knees. I have young children, an ex-wife who depends on alimony. I can give everything back. I can testify against the others. Testify? Emma tilted her head, her expression cold. Derek, you don't understand. We don't need your testimony. We have 2,000 pages of solid evidence, high-definition recordings, forensic analysis. You're not a source of information. You're the end product. For months, while humiliating Emma on a daily basis, Derek had been studied like a laboratory specimen. Every movement analyzed, every crime documented, every connection mapped. He thought he was controlling a submissive waitress with no power, when in fact he was being manipulated by a federal operation that used him as bait for much bigger fish. Robert, James called, and an elegant man in a dark suit appeared in the hallway. This is Robert Chun, my advisor. He is also a licensed federal prosecutor and was coordinating the operation with my wife. Derek looked at Robert, vaguely recognizing his face. You've dined here several times. 47 times in the last 8 months, Robert confirmed, smiling. Always watching, always recording. You served wine to the man who was building your criminal case, Derek. And you were always very polite. The irony was brutal. For months, Derek had treated these men with reverence, believing they admired his business savvy. In fact, they were studying him like a predator studies its prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Emma documented every transaction. Robert continued, his voice professional. But we needed something more. We needed you to commit a crime in front of James himself. A crime that couldn't be denied or minimized. Congressman Bradley's bribe, Emma explained, her eyes sharp. $7,000 offered in front of 4 hidden cameras and 3 federal witnesses. The perfect crime to close your case. Derek finally understood. The bribe situation had not been a coincidence or an unforeseen opportunity. It had been carefully orchestrated to force him to commit a federal crime in the presence of indisputable witnesses. You gave us exactly what we needed, James said calmly. A man in a position of power, systematically humiliating a qualified woman while simultaneously stealing from clients and facilitating political corruption. The perfect crime with the most despicable motives. Robert opened his own briefcase, revealing a stack of already signed arrest warrants. Derek Harrison, you're under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, workplace harassment, and conspiracy to commit federal fraud. As Robert read his rights, Derek looked one last time at Emma. The woman he had treated like trash for 2 years stood there, calm and dignified, watching the fall of the empire of corruption he had helped build. What Derek would never discover was that his arrest would be only the first domino to fall in an operation that would completely transform the political landscape of Boston, and that the waitress he had so despised was about to become one of the most influential women in the city, not out of revenge, but out of meticulously executed justice. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, Derek realized that every humiliation he had imposed had only fueled a quiet determination that now proved more powerful than all his arrogance and prejudice combined. proving that underestimating someone based on their job is not only morally wrong, it is strategically suicidal. As Robert cuffed Derek, a deafening sound of sirens filled the air outside the restaurant. Through the windows, Derek could see a fleet of FBI cars surrounding Sterling Heights. Federal agents entering the front door with search and seizure warrants. "No," Derek whispered, reality finally hitting him like a hammer. "You can't do this to me. I cooperated with you. I facilitated the deals." "Facilitated?" Emma laughed softly, a laugh that cut Derek deeper than any scream. "Derek, did you really think we were partners? That we shared some kind of criminal complicity?" James signaled to his associates, who immediately began escorting Derek toward the waiting federal agents. But Emma raised her hand, asking for one final moment. "Before you walk out of our lives forever, Derek, I want you to understand exactly what happened here." She opened the briefcase one last time, revealing not only documents, but photographs that made Derek stagger. The first photo showed Derek at a nearby bar 3 months ago, bragging to other managers about how he kept the staff in line through intimidation. The second showed him altering credit card receipts. The third captured the exact moment he had placed his hand on Jessica, the sommelier's shoulder, against her will. 52 restaurants in Boston, Emma continued calmly, her voice like ice. All of them received copies of this evidence last night, along with a letter detailing your methods of harassment and corruption. Derek's face drained of all color. His career in the restaurant industry wasn't just over. It was completely destroyed. No reputable establishment in the city would ever hire him again. "Your ex-wife also received a complete copy," Robert added casually. Of particular interest was the documentation of the $62,000 you embezzled from alimony funds over the past 3 years. Derek spun around, his eyes wild. "Jennifer can't. She won't. Actually, she already filed for a full review of the divorce settlement this morning," James informed him, checking his phone. Apparently, discovering that her ex-husband is a federal criminal significantly changes the terms of child custody. It was then that Derek realized the true magnitude of his destruction. It wasn't just his job or his freedom. It was his family, his reputation, his entire identity being systematically demolished piece by piece. "Please," he begged one last time, tears beginning to form. "My children, they'll grow up knowing their father is a criminal. Your children will grow up knowing that actions have consequences," Emma replied firmly, her voice unwavering. "And maybe that will prevent them from becoming people like you." When the federal agents finally took Derek away, he turned one last time to Emma. "Why didn't you say who you were? Why did you pretend to be just a waitress?" Emma smiled, the first time she had shown any real emotion during the entire confrontation. "Because I wasn't pretending anything, Derek. I am a waitress. A waitress with 2 college degrees, who speaks 5 languages, who is married to one of the most powerful men in the city, and who just coordinated the largest anti-corruption operation in Boston history." She paused, watching Derek being put into the federal CAR. "The difference between us is that you looked at me and saw only my profession, my gender, someone you could control. I looked at you and saw exactly who you really were from day one." As the car drove away, Emma turned to James. "Has the press been informed?" "Channel 5 News goes on air in 30 minutes, James confirmed. "Operation Sterling Sweep. Corruption network dismantled by undercover investigation. Your photo will be on the front page of the Boston Globe tomorrow." Robert approached with a tablet showing the headlines that were already beginning to appear online. "Heroic Waitress exposes multi-million-dollar corruption scheme. Woman dismantles corrupt power system in Boston." The stories dominated social media. 14 politicians, 9 judges, 18 businessmen, Emma murmured, watching the list of arrests that continued to grow in real time. 8 months of work, countless hours of documentation, and Derek Harrison was the key that opened all the doors. What Derek would never know was that his arrest was being broadcast live to a classroom at Harvard University where Emma had been invited to speak about undercover investigation and corporate ethics. The following week, law, business, and journalism students watched in reverent silence as a woman who had been systematically underestimated because of her job and gender methodically dismantled an empire of privilege and corruption built on decades of impunity. Proving that true intelligence does not manifest itself through shouting or confrontation, but through strategic patience and meticulous documentation that transforms each humiliation suffered into irrefutable evidence for the most satisfying execution of justice possible. 6 months later, Emma stood on the main stage of the Boston Convention Center before an audience of over 3,000 people. Business leaders, government officials, social activists, and college students rose to their feet in applause as she received the National Ethics and Integrity Award from the governor of Massachusetts. "It is an honor," Emma began, her voice steady and clear, "to stand before you today as proof that patience, documentation, and strategic thinking can defeat even the most entrenched systems of corruption." But the story really begins 8 months before Derek Harrison's arrest, when James and I first discussed the possibility of going undercover. The auditorium was silent, every person riveted. Emma had become a sensation overnight, her face on magazine covers, interview requests from 60 major news outlets, book deals worth millions. But she had waited 6 months before telling her story publicly, wanting the legal proceedings to be completed first. "My husband suspected that Sterling Heights was being used as a money laundering hub," Emma continued, walking across the stage with confidence. "But suspicion isn't evidence. We needed documentation. We needed someone on the inside who could observe, record, and build an airtight case. So I applied for a waitressing position under my maiden name, Emma Collins. No mention of my education. No mention of my marriage. Just a woman looking for work." The audience leaned forward, captivated. "What I discovered in my first week shocked even us," Emma said, her voice dropping lower. Derek Harrison wasn't just a corrupt manager. He was the architect of an entire system designed to exploit workers while facilitating criminal activity. She clicked a remote and a screen behind her lit up. Photos of altered receipts appeared. Recordings played of Derek making degrading comments to staff. Video showed suspicious cash exchanges in the restaurant's back office. "Every single day for 8 months, Emma continued, I documented everything. Derek thought I was weak. Controllable. Someone who would accept humiliation in silence because I needed the job." She paused, letting the words sink in. He was wrong. The crowd erupted in applause. But Emma raised her hand for silence. "The most dangerous part," Emma said, her voice intense, "wasn't the risk of being discovered. It was maintaining my composure while being treated as if I was worthless." Day after day, Derek made comments about my intelligence, about my capabilities, about my value as a human being. A video played on the screen behind her. Security footage from Sterling Heights showing Derek berating Emma in front of customers, pushing her shoulder roughly, cutting her off mid-sentence. The audience watched in horrified silence. "I recorded everything," Emma said quietly. "Not just the corruption, but the cruelty. Because Derek Harrison represented something bigger than one corrupt manager. He represented a system where people in power believe they can treat others as disposable, where abuse is normalized, where speaking up is punished." She clicked to the next slide. A photo of the moment Derek had grabbed her arm that final night. The moment James had appeared. "My husband asked me if I wanted to end the operation early," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "If the psychological cost was too high. But I refused. Because I knew that every day I stayed, every humiliation I endured, was building a case that would destroy not just Derek, but the entire network he protected." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Emma wiped her eyes, composed herself. "The night of my confrontation with Derek, we had everything we needed. 8 months of evidence. Federal warrants signed. FBI agents positioned. All we needed was for Derek to commit one final crime in front of witnesses that couldn't be disputed." She smiled, remembering. Congressman Bradley's bribe was the perfect trap. $7,000 offered in front of hidden cameras. Federal prosecutors watching. And Derek took the bait exactly as we predicted. Because men like Derek always believe they're smarter than everyone else. Behind Emma, the screen showed mugshots of all the arrested officials. 14 politicians. 9 judges. 18 businessmen. All connected through Sterling Heights. All exposed through Emma's 8 months of methodical work. "These arrests weren't just about justice," Emma said, her voice rising. "They were about sending a message. That abuse of power has consequences. That corruption can be dismantled. That one person with courage and documentation can bring down an entire network of criminals." But here's what I want you to understand. Emma stepped to the edge of the stage, her eyes scanning the audience. I'm not special. I'm not uniquely brave. I'm just someone who refused to accept that humiliation was the price of having a job, who documented everything, who stayed patient even when I wanted to scream. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. If you're in a situation where you're being mistreated, Emma said fiercely, document it. Record conversations where legally allowed. Keep emails. Take photos. Build your case methodically and patiently. Because the system works when you have evidence it can't ignore. She clicked to her final slide. Contact information for worker protection organizations, legal aid resources, documentation guides. I've created a free online course, Emma announced, teaching people how to document workplace abuse, how to build cases that stand up in court, how to protect themselves while gathering evidence. It's available starting today. The crowd erupted. People were already pulling out phones, taking photos of the screen, sharing the information. As Emma left the stage, a young woman in her 20s approached, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, the woman whispered. My boss. He treats me the same way Derek treated you. I've been too scared to say anything. But now, Emma took the woman's hands. Document everything. Be patient. Build your case methodically. And when you're ready, the system will work for you. I promise. Later that evening, Emma sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor with James. A glass of wine in her hand, the city lights glittering below. You changed everything, James said quietly. 14 corrupt politicians are gone. 9 judges who sold justice are facing prosecution. 18 businessmen who thought they were untouchable are in federal custody. But Emma shook her head. I didn't change everything. I changed one network in one city. There are thousands more Derek Harrisons out there. Thousands more systems built on abuse and corruption. So what do we do? James asked. Emma turned to him, fire in her eyes. We teach others. We share the methodology. We create a movement where victims become documentarians, where patience becomes strategy, where every humiliation suffered becomes evidence that destroys the abuser. Her phone buzzed. Another interview request. Another speaking invitation. Another person reaching out saying Emma's story had inspired them to document their own workplace abuse. This is just the beginning, Emma said softly. Derek Harrison thought he was destroying a powerless waitress. Instead, he created a movement. James raised his glass in a toast. To strategic patience. To meticulous documentation. To my brilliant wife who proved that the PN, or in this case, the hidden recording device, is mightier than power. They clinked glasses. Outside, Boston glittered. Somewhere in that city, another person was being mistreated, being humiliated, being told they were worthless. But now, they had a blueprint, a strategy, a hope that documentation and patience could lead to justice. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, a message from the governor. Invitation to advise on new workplace protection legislation. Her methods were becoming state policy. Her documentation techniques being taught in law schools. Her story inspiring thousands. What Derek Harrison had intended as her destruction had become her legacy. A legacy of justice, of empowerment, of proving that no matter how powerless you feel, with patience and evidence, you can bring down empires. And that legacy was just beginning to spread across the country, transforming victims into strategists, humiliation into evidence, and silent suffering into roaring justice that would echo for generations. Making Emma Collins not just a survivor, but a revolutionary who'd weaponized patience and turned documentation into the most powerful tool for justice the modern world had ever seen. 1 year after Derek Harrison's arrest, Emma stood in a very different kind of room. Not a convention center or university, but a small community center in South Boston. 15 women sat in folding chairs, their faces showing varying degrees of hope and exhaustion. Some were waitresses like Emma had pretended to be. Others worked in offices, retail stores, warehouses. But they all had one thing in common. They were being mistreated at work and didn't know how to fight back. My name is Emma Blackwell, she began, and for 8 months, I worked as an undercover waitress documenting one of the largest corruption networks in Boston history. But before that, I was just like you. Someone who knew something was wrong but didn't know how to prove it. A woman in the back raised her hand tentatively. How did you know when you had enough evidence? When did you know it was time to act? Emma smiled, understanding the fear in that question. I didn't know. That's the truth. Every day I wondered if I had enough. If what I was documenting would matter. But my husband, who's a prosecutor, taught me something crucial. She walked to a whiteboard and wrote in bold letters. 1 incident is hearsay. 2 incidents is coincidence. 3 incidents is a pattern. 50 incidents is a federal case. The women leaned forward, some taking notes. Derek Harrison made 46 recorded mistakes over 8 months, Emma continued. Each one documented with date, time, witnesses, and context. By month 3, I had enough for a harassment case. By month 5, I had enough for fraud charges. By month 8, I had enough to bring down an entire network. Another woman spoke up, her voice shaking. But what if we can't wait 8 months? What if we need to act now? Then you act now, Emma said firmly. But you act smart. She clicked to a presentation on her laptop. Projected on the wall were step-by-step instructions. Step 1, Emma explained. Document everything legally. Know your state's recording laws. In Massachusetts, only one party needs to consent to recording. That means if you're part of the conversation, you can record it. Write down everything immediately after it happens. Dates, times, exact words if possible. A younger woman in the front row was crying quietly. My boss, he touches my shoulder all the time. Makes comments about my appearance. But HR says it's just his personality. Emma's expression hardened. That's grooming language. HR using personality to normalize abuse. Here's what you do. She wrote on the whiteboard. Document every touch. Every comment. Keep a detailed log. Then file a formal written complaint with HR so their response is on record. When they dismiss it as personality, you have documentation of their negligence. The woman looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. That would actually work. It's exactly what I did with Derek, Emma confirmed. Every time he made a condescending comment, I documented it. Every time he touched me inappropriately, I noted the date, time, and any witnesses. By the end, I had a timeline so detailed that his lawyers couldn't dispute a single incident. Over the next 2 hours, Emma taught these women everything. How to use hidden phone recordings app. How to write documentation that would hold up in court. How to identify witnesses. How to preserve evidence. How to stay safe while building a case. But the most important lesson came at the end. You need to understand something crucial, Emma said, her voice intense. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And justice requires patience. The women nodded, understanding dawning. Derek Harrison humiliated me almost every day for 8 months, Emma continued. There were times I wanted to quit. Times I wanted to scream at him. Times I wanted to reveal who I really was and watch him grovel. But I didn't. Because every humiliation I endured made the case stronger. Every condescending comment was another nail in his coffin. Every inappropriate touch was more evidence. She paused, making eye contact with each woman. Your abusers are counting on you being too emotional to document, too scared to act, too tired to fight. Prove them wrong. Be cold. Be methodical. Be absolutely relentless in your documentation. Because when you finally strike, you want them to have no escape. The meeting ended with tears and hugs. Women exchanging contact information, creating support networks, downloading the documentation apps Emma recommended. As they filed out, the woman who'd asked the first question approached. I start documenting tomorrow, she said with newfound determination. My boss has been stealing credit for my work for 2 years. I'm going to build a case he can't deny. Emma hugged her tightly. Make him regret underestimating you. 3 months later, Emma received an email that made her smile with satisfaction. Subject line, you were right. The email was from that same woman. Ms. Blackwell, I followed your advice exactly. 3 months of documentation. 42 incidents of my boss taking credit for my work. Emails proving I originated the ideas. Witnesses confirming the theft. Yesterday, I presented everything to the executive board. My boss was terminated, and I was promoted to his position with back pay for 3 years. You changed my life. Emma showed the email to James that evening. They were in their home office, reviewing the latest statistics from Emma's free documentation course. Over 50,000 people had completed IT. 1,200 workplace abuse cases had been successfully documented and prosecuted. The methodology Emma developed was being taught in law schools across the country. "You created something extraordinary," James said, pulling up a news article. "Listen to this." He read aloud. "The Collins method of workplace documentation has revolutionized how victims of abuse build cases." Named after Emma Collins, the undercover waitress who brought down Boston's largest corruption network, the method emphasizes patience, detailed documentation, and strategic timing. Legal experts say it's the most effective tool for workplace justice in decades. Emma felt tears forming. Tears of gratitude, of validation, of knowing that her 8 months of humiliation had created something lasting. But there was more work to do. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Is this Emma Blackwell?" A young voice asked, shaking. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Rachel Martinez. I'm a paralegal at a law firm in Chicago. I've been documenting sexual harassment from a senior partner for 6 months using your method. I have 83 recorded incidents." Emma sat up straight. "Rachel, have you reported this to your firm's ethics board?" "I'm scared," Rachel admitted. "He's powerful. Connected. What if they don't believe me? What if I lose my job?" "They will believe you," Emma said firmly, "because you have evidence they can't ignore. 83 incidents means you're not making it up. It means he's a serial predator." She spent the next hour on the phone, walking Rachel through exactly how to present her case, how to remain calm, how to insist on formal proceedings, how to protect herself legally. 2 weeks later, Emma received another email. Subject line, "He's gone." Rachel's email detailed the victory. The senior partner had been terminated. 3 other women had come forward with their own documentation after Rachel's courage. The law firm had implemented new protection policies, and Rachel had been offered a position at a prestigious civil rights organization. She'd become an advocate herself. This became Emma's new mission. Not just documenting her own story, but empowering others to document theirs. Teaching victims to become strategists. Transforming pain into evidence. Turning humiliation into justice. 5 years after Derek Harrison's arrest, Emma stood once again on a stage. This time at a congressional hearing in Washington, D.C., testifying about workplace protection legislation. "Members of Congress," Emma began, her voice strong and clear. "5 years ago, I spent 8 months being humiliated daily by a corrupt manager. Today, I'm here representing over 100,000 people who have used the Collins method to document workplace abuse and secure justice." She clicked to a presentation. Statistics filled the screen. 100,000 cases documented. 72,000 successfully prosecuted. 15,000 perpetrators terminated. 3,000 criminal charges filed. "But here's what matters most," Emma continued, her voice rising. "These aren't just numbers. These are people who refused to accept that abuse was the price of having a job. People who documented their suffering and transformed it into evidence. People who proved that patience and documentation are more powerful than any title or position." Congressman Davis leaned forward. "Ms. Blackwell, what would you say to someone watching this testimony who's currently being mistreated at work?" Emma looked directly into the camera, knowing her words would reach millions. "I would say start documenting. Today. Right now. Don't wait for it to get worse. Don't hope it will get better. Build your case methodically. Be patient. Be strategic. And know that every humiliation you endure is building evidence that will eventually destroy your abuser." The hearing room was silent. Then applause erupted from the public gallery. People standing, some crying. Because Emma wasn't just testifying about legislation. She was giving hope to millions of people who felt powerless. That evening, Emma returned to Boston. To the penthouse she shared with James. To the life she'd built not despite her 8 months of humiliation, but because of the strength those months had forced her to develop. James met her at the door with champagne. "To my wife," he said, raising his glass, "who turned 8 months of abuse into a movement that's changed hundreds of thousands of lives." Emma clinked her glass against his. "To Derek Harrison," she said with a smile, "who thought he was destroying a powerless waitress and instead created the catalyst for the biggest workplace justice movement of the century." They laughed together. Outside, Boston sparkled. Somewhere in that city, someone was documenting their first incident, writing down dates and times, recording a conversation, building a case, following Emma's method. And tomorrow, someone else would start. And the day after that, someone else. A movement born from one woman's refusal to accept that humiliation was the price of survival. A movement that proved patience was power. That documentation was justice. That 8 months of strategic silence could speak louder than years of shouting. Derek Harrison sat in federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his career ended, his family estranged. He had 7 years left on his sentence. 7 years to think about the waitress he'd underestimated. The woman whose suffering he'd dismissed. The victim who'd become his destroyer. And every night, in his cell, he wondered how it had all gone so wrong. How his perfect system had collapsed. How one woman had brought down an entire network. He would never understand. Because men like Derek never understand that underestimating someone isn't just cruel. It's suicidal. That every person you abuse is building a memory. Every humiliation is creating motivation. Every dismissal is forging determination. And when that determination combines with patience, documentation, and strategic thinking, it becomes the most powerful force in the world. Justice. Inevitable. Inescapable. Absolute. Emma Collins had proven that. And her legacy would ensure that thousands more would prove it again, making the world just slightly more dangerous for abusers and infinitely more hopeful for their victims. One documented incident at a time. If you believe in the power of documentation and patience to defeat corruption, smash that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling us if you've ever faced workplace abuse and how you fought back. Share this story with everyone who needs to know that being underestimated isn't weakness. It's an opportunity to build a case your abusers will never see coming. Don't miss our next story.